Hello and welcome to the 792nd dev update with Ergo. I am QX, and with me we have a special guest. Everybody's favorite darling, Luivatra. How you doing, Louis?
I'm doing very good, thank you.
It's very good. As you can tell, I am in Santa's workshop here with all the Christmas stuff, and Luivatra is literally in a blizzard. It's so much snow that it's so white.
Either that or heaven. But probably
All right.
blizzard.
So, Louis, you are a community dev, and you're working on several projects that a lot of people interact with every day. So I say let's have that as our topic of discussion. I'll give you a chance to let us know when Paideia and maybe some other things with Crux Finance that have coming out. So let's start with Paideia. How's the beta going?
It's going very well, actually. I would say better than expected. Most of the bugs that we found are front-end bugs, which are, of course, annoying to the user, but not really concerning to us, at least. Our biggest concern was finding that the system couldn't handle more than 2 users using it.
That's an issue.
Yeah, and it's difficult to test things like that, right? So it's always something you're worried about, and also just in general, users will always find stuff and break stuff that you've never thought about, and that hasn't really been the case. They have found stuff and broken stuff that we didn't think about, but nothing fundamental in the contracts and so on. So that's great.
Can you I pause you for 1 second? So for people watching, can you just briefly in like 2 minutes just explain how you're able to store so much data with Paideia off chain and verify that on chain, essentially? So not everything lives on chain, but the trust will live on chain and the verification will live on chain for that kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, sure. So we're testing both the Web3 and the Web2 parts. So we have the important things we're storing on chain, which is how much does each user have staked of their governance tokens. So how much are they? How much voting power do they have in the DAO? And then also the voting itself and the proposals, they are stored on chain. But then we also have a Web2 part that hooks into this Web3 part. So the Web3 part can live on its own on chain. You could interact with that directly if you wanted to. It would be a bit an ugly experience, but it's possible. So if our website goes down, you can still interact with it. But we have built this Web2 shell around it, where the comments and discussions live surrounding these proposals. So if someone creates a proposal, either on chain directly or through our Web2 front end, it will be stored on chain, and the front end will pick that up, put it in the database, and then you can write comments on it and have discussions on why this proposal is a good or a bad idea. So the benefit to that is that the important parts that are on chain, they can't be messed with. They are guarded by smart contracts and everything. But the discussions and the commenting, the liking, the following, all of that is Web2, which allows for it to be much more responsive and give much more a user experience that you would know from Reddit or Facebook or whatever. Hopefully better than those, but
well, I don't know. A 2-minute block time to post a comment, Louis, might really slow down some rampant discussion where people are heated.
Yeah. So that's where we're trying to find the balance, and also just to preserve space on the blockchain, right? We don't want to take all the space on Ergo just for Paideia. That would not be very good for anything else, and if nothing else can live on the chain, then what are we doing with Paideia? So And then on top of that, we use these AVL trees that I can see in the last dev update that others are using as well for ChainCash, for example, where you basically have a whole bunch of data that you're keeping track of off-chain, and every time you change that data, you post like the fingerprint of that data on chain. And you have a smart contract making sure that it's the correct fingerprint. That saves a lot of space, and that makes it possible to have thousands of stakers in one small box on chain. You can have thousands of votes in one small box on chain, and so on.
So your code before displaying it to the user will check for that fingerprint. So it's not like somebody has to be in the background just making sure these fingerprints are correct. Your code display won't show it unless it is actually correct and the right one.
Yeah. So basically, what happens is whenever you want to change this fingerprint, you're saying, okay, we start with this current fingerprint that we have on chain. I want to make these changes to the data which result in this new fingerprint, and with AVL trees, you can provide proof that this new fingerprint is the correct one. And that can also be proven inside the smart contract. So you're proving it on chain, but you're only storing a small part of it.
That's awesome. What's next for the next stage of testing for Paideia?
Yeah, so the next part is creation of DAOs. So for a DAO, each DAO will have a whole bunch of NFTs and contracts that are needed. You'll have a treasury contract, so each DAO will have its own treasury address, its own NFT that is like identifying the box for the stake pool and so on. There's a whole bunch of things that need to be done before a DAO can operate. So the way we have that set up is that the user sends their demanded configurations into a proxy contract, and then from this proxy contract, the system takes over along with smart contracts to make sure that the user doesn't get screwed. It would be fun if an off-chain operator could, put in their own address instead of the treasury address, so they get all the funds of the DAO instead of the DAO itself. So everything is guarded with smart contracts. The NFTs are minted and put into the correct addresses, and then once that process is done, it will show up in the front end. It will be picked up there, and then people can start staking their governance tokens, whatever is part of that DAO, and start participating in governance.
And is that hard coded into the DAO? There's no chance. Let's say there's some sort of upset if something happens where a majority of the tokens to do this are lost. Is there a way to redo that treasury inside the DAO so you don't have to lose all the historic data of what the DAO was, or do you just need to start a new
if you want to DAO. do what?
Let's say something happens where some of the tokens that you distribute for voting are lost or a majority of them are gone. Is there a way to reboot that DAO inside itself with a new treasury and new minted token? Or do you actually have to just start a new DAO and you keep the old one around for historic purposes just to read the history?
That's a good question. It is a configuration setting, which token is the governance token. But I would not recommend changing that. Gotcha. So I would say create a new one with the new token, and then just create a proposal in the old one to move the funds from the treasury to the new one.
That makes sense. That does. So I hear you have some cool things coming up for your other gig, which is the other project, which is Crux Finance.
Crux Finance, yes. So right now we have the token view where you can view the different tokens and see their charts. But besides that, we also have the portfolio view where you can see like the current state of your portfolio and hopefully the correct values of the different tokens, which is not always that straightforward with where you could have, for example, yield farm tokens that are basically a representation of a bunch of liquidity pool tokens, which are basically a representation of some erg and some other tokens.
It's complicated, yeah.
Yeah, it's layers upon layers. So that's quite a challenge to get that right. Then on top of that, we want to, or we are going to add positions, which is positions that you have in the different tokens. So what cost basis do you have for your Paideia? How much did you spend buying those? How much are they worth right now? How much did you earn on them in the last 24 hours, in the last month, in the last year, and so on. So you can have an idea on what parts of my Ergo portfolio are doing well and which ones are not.
How much we've lost, yeah, usually.
Yeah. Don't say
liquidity. I mean, I'm not. I try to provide liquidity just to provide it and support it. So it's going to be scary to look at this to see,
I know.
see how bad I've done or how good I've done. Perhaps.
But this would just be for straight tokens. But then we also have a section for vested tokens, which is a fairly straightforward one. But it's nice to have it in the overview there. And then there's also stake tokens. So how much did I earn in rewards on my stake in Ergopad, in Paideia, and all the different ones. And then also finally the liquidity, like you said, how much did I put into the liquidity pool, both in Erg and token, and how much of each does that liquidity represent now? So if the token price went up, then you will have less of the token and more Erg, right? For example. And then what is the value of this change? So did I gain more on one side than I lost on the other, or did I lose to impermanent loss? So that should also be a nice tool, I think, because like you say, right now, unless you have a spreadsheet where you do it manually, you have no clue.
Yeah, I think I did, what's it called? I recorded myself adding it via a video for a tutorial. And so every once in a while I reference that to see how much I had put in originally, essentially.
Yeah.
So this is automatic, Louis? You don't have to put in the date that you did this. Your Crux Finance will see when those coins were deposited or tokens were deposited and then give you the calculation from there.
Yeah, it's all on chain. Right now, it's going to be a bit sensitive if you do things like send liquidity pool tokens out of your wallet or get them sent into your portfolio. So if you give all your wallets and you just do all your DeFi stuff within these wallets, then it should work fine. But if you, for some reason, bought liquidity pool tokens from someone, so they come from outside of your portfolio into your portfolio, then it might be a bit messed up right now. That can be solved, but
sounds a little tough to solve.
Take some more effort. Sure.
Yeah. Well, that's pretty cool. What's the can I say when?
The when on this is when Marty gets it implemented on the front end.
You've done the back end already. So this is a call out. We're calling Marty out.
And the poor guy is going on holiday tomorrow. So.
Marty, he's gone. So what's that, like a 4-month holiday for people?
In
the US?
We got our Connecta money now. So.
Good timing. Oh gosh.
No, it's just a week. So hopefully it should be pretty straightforward to implement. So hopefully before Christmas.
Okay, fantastic. And Connecta Finance as well. Are you part of coding that on the Cardano side?
Yeah, actually, I coded some Cardano smart contracts this weekend. I did it in the weekend because I didn't want to interrupt my other work. But that was actually a better experience than I expected. I remember looking at the Spectrum when they went the Cardano way, looking at their contracts, and I was thinking, oh, I can kind of see what's going on here, but I'm not looking forward to working with this. But the tooling on Cardano has improved a lot. So that's that's nice to see, but just for Cardano itself, but also just to be able to experience that and maybe get some ideas for Ergo. Especially when we go up in price, we can attract more devs, more money, and also improve the tooling. Then it's nice to have some inspiration in other places.
Good point. Good point. All right, let's want to dive into the dev update?
Sure.
All right, let me switch my screen over here. All right, I'll go first with Kushti. Kushti has made scripts, powered tables with bounties. It's GitHub for it. For now, AVL tree Rust is synced, working on Sigma and then the node. Hopefully, will be sorted out this week. New repos will be added, such as Ergo Wallet, Explore Backend, Oracle Pool, ChainCash, Dexy, and sponsored by other entities in the EF. Ergo Protocol Research and Development worked on versioning and reviewed. There's a GitHub pull right there, reviewing some Sigmastate interpreter right there as well, and Node 5.0.16 release. Right? Wait, was that released? Did I miss that? 16's out?
It was a small fix for something that they broke in 15.
Oh, oh shoot! All right,
which actually affected Paideia beta testing.
Oh, nice. Pushing code on top of this merged, polishing sidechains white paper started slides for the summit. ChainCash progress here is mostly by soysor, in particular empty AVL tree hash in Rust library has been fixed. First transactions creating reverses are done. In Dexy, they decided to revert freenum in LP to be corresponding to Spectrum to have more compatible backend. Contracts are modified, checking tests now. Oracle Pool deciding which Oracle Pool operators on how to test next pool updates first in testnet. And I think I heard from Kushti today in the SIGs meeting that he's going to try to get some more community chats like on sidechains, what are the sub-blocks, that kind of thing, to get that talk back out in the chats, which will be fun. Oh my God, look at this. We didn't even time this. Next person up with the next update.
I already saw it before.
Who's this guy?
I don't know, but let me read what he wrote. Fixing backend and front-end bugs, very descriptive. That's mostly because it wasn't me. It's mostly Noob that was doing that. But yeah, like I said before, we're moving on to the next phase. Creating DAOs. I have made this backend before, but that was before I made some changes in other parts of the system. So I will have to go through that again, just to make sure everything matches. Yeah, and I'll test creating a DAO myself using this method before we let it loose on everyone else, before we get 10 different comment DAOs and greasy sex and everything. And Crux, yeah, waiting for Marty. Because the back end is done.
Poor Marty. Yeah. We'll have to tag him in the YouTube video.
I said in chat earlier today that he shouldn't stress. He should go on holiday. And now I'm saying we're waiting on Marty.
All right, what do we have next? We have Ilya from Spectrum. Tested full-size committee threshold signatures on chain. Going to review cross-chain vault implementation. Super cool. I'm looking forward to whatever that brings. Dex finished abstract temporal liquidity book engine, IMPL, and working on support for TBL in new off-chain bots. What's TBL stand for, Louis? Do we know?
It's in the sentence above it. It says temporal.
Oh, temporary liquidity book. Great. Thank you very much. You're so smart. I throw you a softball and you make me look like shit. Classic Luivatra.
but to be honest, I had never heard of this term before.
He probably just made it up. Who knows?
Yeah, you know? Probably. Yeah. Yeah, he just wanted to coin a term so his white paper can be cited.
You got Colby coming up here.
You don't want me to read this excellent question that this.
Oh yeah, go
this
for it. Why don't you
Luivatra
read this Luivatra question?
Yeah, well, basically there it shows that I had no idea what temporal liquidity book meant, so that's why I asked, does that mean order book functionality? And Ilya responded, technically yes, it covers all types of liquidity that can be composed. And when we're saying composed in EUTXO or EUTXO, it's where you combine different smart contracts together in one transaction. So liquidity could also be in a Babel fee box, for example, so which is not intended to be sold on the DEX, but it's basically selling a token for a specific price in Erg, right? So if the token or the DEX is at that specific price point, you could use the Babel fee box to sell tokens at that price to the DEX. So it's when you're combining different contracts together, you're composing them. It takes some work to make the contracts in that way, because you kind of need to leave them a bit open-ended, which can make it more difficult to make them secure. But it does allow for a lot of cool things to happen, like you're building Lego bricks, right, that you can build together to make new functionality. So that sounds really cool, to be honest. The only question is when.
When it's a big question.
Yeah.
Sounds like you got temporal liquidity books. Is it going to be like ethereal liquidity books? Sounds like some Dungeons and Dragons terms coming up. Very cool. All right, I think you got Colby here.
Yeah. So he's working on the node. That's actually really great to see. I'm sure Kushti is thrilled with some sparring there. I'm sure he felt a bit lonely every now and then with the node work. So yeah, he's working with Kushti on doing a lot of refactoring that is sorely needed on the node code. And part of this code is now called the Ergo core. And he's also looking at getting the Scala code that is part of this to be compatible with Scala 2.13. And what is interesting about Scala 2.13 is that it's compatible with Scala 3. So that's like a bridge, a stepping stone to get the code up to Scala 3, which is obviously a newer version of Scala and a more modern version, and probably also more interesting for new devs that might want to work on the node. So that's it. Doesn't sound like much when you read that line, but it's a pretty interesting and exciting thing he's working on.
This Scala 3 is the latest?
Yeah,
or is there above that?
It is. But usually languages, it's major versions, right? So Scala 2 to Scala 3 is like there is a difference there. And if you're working in Scala 2.12, for example, then there's no guarantee that your code is going to work compiling it in Scala 3 compiler. But for 2.13, there is that backwards compatibility. So that's pretty cool.
Very cool. Your dog seemed pretty excited about it too.
Oh, I'm just zoning that out. He's barking all the time. So. I didn't train him to bark when I say Scala 3.
Nautilus team update. Fleet SDK fixed ESM and CGS modules exports while at working on prove dlog protocol. ergo-graphql completed integration tests. Nautilus got a deadline from Manifest 2, end of support from Google, so working on roadmap to update and do a major refactor. Cool.
Yeah. Refactors. It's boring but needed. So then we have FlyingPig. It's really cool to see him in the dev update.
It is.
He actually is a sparring partner for me for our off-chain bots and so on. He's running all of them and doing all kinds of weird things with them to optimize them. So he's also the first one to know when something breaks, and he DMs me. So that's awesome.
Your off-chain bots for Paideia or for where?
For everything.
Just general.
Yeah, Paideia. Wow. He is running them for Paideia. Also the real Paideia. It's not just the old Paideia staking, but he's running the new Paideia off-chain stuff. So that's great because that's also a good test to make sure they don't break when there's multiple operators running at the same time. But yeah, he's awesome. But he's working on the ergo-node explorer right now.
He's the one that he sent out for everybody that doesn't know. He developed a sort of non-chain based transaction mass send recently, where you can send a massive amount of transactions. They're not even chained. I think he stopped, he said, because he ran out of ergs. And and what's it called? Yeah. And he sent the Lambo, right?
Yeah.
That was him.
Yeah. That's true. Yeah. So what he's working on is an ergo-node explorer. He did a UI makeover. Should render nicely on mobile. I didn't test it yet, but I did test it before, and I could say it was not rendering nicely before. So that's good. Showing the last 5 blocks and whatever transactions are in them. Searching for addresses. Fixing a bunch of minor bugs. He is looking to implement unconfirmed transactions, so the mempool, which the mempool is like the Wild West. It's difficult to deal with that. There's all kinds of ghost transactions hanging out there that are not valid anymore, and there's copies of different transactions just with slightly different fees and so on. So it's not easy to work with. But the cool thing about all this is that he's building it on top of the indexed node. So where normally the explorers that we have, the explorer that most people probably know, they are basically, it's a whole separate piece of software beside the ergo-node. So it pulls data out of the ergo-node and dumps it into a SQL database, allowing for querying in different ways that would normally
not fun. It's not fun to run, that's for sure.
No, it's really heavy. It takes a lot of resources, much more than just the node itself, which in effect means that there's less instances of the explorer running, so it's less decentralized. So the more something is depending on an explorer, the more it's susceptible to being taken down because some explorer instance goes down. So the index node is basically it does a little bit of what the explorer does in the node itself. It's probably slightly heavier. It takes a little bit more disk space than just a normal node, but it's much lighter to run than the explorer. So it's much easier for dApps and different projects to run their own instance. And if they wanted to, they could run their own ergo-node explorer on top of that to be able to look into it. Yeah,
that's exactly what we need here. So we need more of those abilities of just any Joe to be able to fire up. As easy as a node is to fire up. And heck, Satergo might be able to build this into his wallet at some point too, so that if you run a Satergo full wallet, you'll have a ergo-node explorer built into it as well that you can share for people. That'd be really cool.
And that's not going to happen with the explorer.
No, that's not the current iteration. That's for sure. Awesome. All right, we've got LiquidPhase with THCFM. Beginning work on ErgoSummit video for Ergo THC requested by Andy. That's awesome. We need more devs that are willing to do that for ErgoSummit. Got my GoPro set up as a computer webcam now, so we'll try to record something very professional looking. Sudden less than ideal news. Potential dev contractor spoke with his corporate overlords and they said no degen for you, so he can't come work on THC at all. And from what I hear in the chat, what THC is doing, may have some conflict of interest with people in the industry. Of course, potentially the boss of one of those guys in the industry would probably not want them to work on that. So he's got lots going on in the real world, so not very much dev work this week, and likely won't be much updates through the holidays except the video that he's putting together. Very cool.
Yeah. So, yeah, there's not much to say about that, right? Other than the corporate overlord stock.
Yeah, that's for sure.
But it's, in a way, it's good that they say no, because that means that they take it seriously, right?
Yeah, if they see it as a threat or competition, yeah. 100%.
So the next one is soysor, however you pronounce that. Like Kushti mentioned in his update, he's working on ChainCash. And he's also reporting that Bulb made his first contribution by updating an Axum dependency. And they fixed an issue in the Rust AVL tree lib, which is great to hear that they're fixing stuff there. Kushti also mentioned that it was surrounding the hash for an empty AVL tree. So the hash in this case is this fingerprint I talked about before. So an AVL tree, when it's empty, it has a distinct fingerprint that you can recognize an empty tree with. So that's always what you start with. And it's kind of important that is correct. So then they also made a Rust API client for the node to replace ergo-node interface. It works with asynchronous calls and eventually non-asynchronous code. That is great to hear, actually. I have to look at that. I might use that.
There goes Paideia, another 7 months.
No, this is actually, I'm not using Rust in Paideia. This is for Crux, actually.
Okay.
So don't worry. They almost finished node creation transaction, got blocked by the now fixed AVL tree issue. So when they create a ChainCash node, the history of it will be empty, right? So that's where they need this empty AVL tree fingerprint. And they obviously couldn't do that because it was bugged. And then they're also, or he has been working on a contract template compiler, and he needs some feedback on that. Or he needs to address feedback on that. So the contract templates are kind of important as well, to be able to consistently compile contracts, or have a template compiled, but then change some of the variables that need to go into the template and compile them in a consistent way. That's actually quite important, because otherwise you could run into an issue where if you compiled a contract with a compiler a year ago, then the address might be different than if you compile it with the compiler as it is now. So that's where templates come in. So you compile the template once and then fill in different constants as you need them. We'll need that for Paideia, for example. So that's great to see that is being worked on.
Very cool. All right, let's see what else we have. It might just be chat. Let me scroll a little bit like crazy.
I think there's a little one from
Rosen
from MHS, a bit down.
Rosen, you said?
Yeah.
Yep. Here we go. All right, so we got Rosen Bridge launch from MHSAN. The launch in progress and will be live very soon. Trademark, very soon. Guards made multi-sig wallets, pending cold wallets on Ergo and Cardano. Config tokens are minted. Initial support assets will be minted tomorrow. Contracts will be deployed in 2 to 3 days. So that was a couple days ago, which I think they just made an announcement today that they were compiling them tonight or deploying them tonight. Release of Watcher Guard UI apps will be deployed contracts and tokens in 4 to 5 days. So they're hitting that. Great job. Watchers can be set up in 5 to 6 days. That might even be believable, Louis. We'll see. That'd be awesome.
Yeah. It's unbelievable at this point.
Exciting.
I'll believe it when I see it.
Yeah, right. And you guys, Paideia or ErgoPad is running a guard, I believe, right? From the website I saw.
Yeah. So I already prepared my local YAML file for filling in the last values. They added a setup.
Look at you. You're ready to go.
I want to be the star student. Turns in the homework first.
So the Rosen Bridge app,
maybe not first, just not last.
Yeah. Not last. Yeah. I think you're good there. There's some stragglers in that chat, that's for sure. Implemented events page listing all events of the bridge. P2P node. Finished extraction of message broker logic. Guard service added an API that adds a transaction to sign process. This API will be used to sign and submit a manually generated transaction. Updated Koyos. How do you say that? That's Cardano, right? Yeah. To Koyos. I can hear what's his name? Boris saying it with his Canadian accent or whatever his accent is. Improved logging can now set multiple log outputs and also supports Loki. Miscellaneous changing Cardano token IDs in our projects is done and tested. It will be used in launch. Setting up and testing multi-sig solutions that supports cold signing on Cardano. So what I learned in chat the other day is you can change tokens after they're minted on Cardano. Did I read that right yesterday?
There's a bunch of things. So there is these policies, right? These minting policies. Basically, it's a smart contract that decides how a token can be minted. Usually, that includes which key can mint the token. And it can decide when can they be minted and burned. So you can, if you want to, you can set up a service on Cardano that just mints tokens all the time until forever, whenever, and then also burn them if you want to. What is usually done to prevent funny things from happening is that part of this minting contract or minting policy is that you also put in a condition saying I can only mint tokens before this time, and then the time is like 2 minutes into the future. So you mint the token and then that's that. So that's as long as the minting policy is like that, then the token can't be changed. Or the token can't be changed either way, but you could add more tokens. But the metadata on the token that is stored on chain it's basically just the policy ID and then a short asset name, which will be a token name, and that's that. That's all. You don't know how many decimals it should have. You don't know the description. You don't know the logo of it and so on. So what they have done is they have I can't remember which. I think it's an IOHK's GitHub or something like that. Maybe Cardano Foundation. I don't know. They have a GitHub repository where they have metadata on all the tokens that bother to submit metadata.
Wait, so that's not on chain?
No. It is signed by the key that minted the token. So you can't just change the metadata. Okay. You need to be able to prove that you own this token, basically, right?
Interesting. So that's how Cardano can do open-ended NFT collections because you can just continue adding to it with the same policy ID without closing the policy.
Exactly. And also, I mean, the benefit of it is that you have this like central token registry where you can also add logos and URLs, Twitter, whatever. I mean, you could add whatever to this metadata, right? And when you add it to that, everyone is looking at this token registry, so it's updated in all the wallets on all the sites.
Who owns a token? Who owns a GitHub there?
So
who owns that GitHub, Louis?
That is the big question.
Okay, let's not get into that. The dev update's not long enough for that.
No, I need to look that up. It's like I said, I think it's IOHK or something like that. But it is centralized. I mean, if they own this repository, right? If they wanted to, they could ignore who is signing these JSONs, and they could just change the data.
So you're saying if something happens to that repository, there's no way to change where the chain looks for that stuff, or is that a variable that could be changed on chain?
The thing is that smart contracts, even on Ergo, they don't care how many decimals a token has. We always deal with like the smallest precision on the token, right? We basically ignore the decimal, and it's the same on Cardano. So it's mostly just for user experience that you see the decimals. But if they wanted to, they could change the decimals on say the Rosen erg that is being minted with 9 decimals, I assume, the same as erg. They could change the decimals to have only 4 decimals, and suddenly everyone has 5 more zeros to their erg balance, right? But I mean, everyone would, so it's not like you suddenly are super rich. The ratio would also be changed the other way, right? So every erg would be worth 5 zeros less ADA and so on. So it wouldn't break anything, but it could definitely throw people off and think, wow, that's cheap erg, or you know, it could definitely do some interesting things.
yeah, I bet somebody would make maybe potentially some money off it briefly. Yeah, interesting. All right, let's see. I think we have one last one that was thrown in from HQ in a DM, and he doesn't deserve me to read this, but I will read it anyway. It's an Ergcube update. He added dollar values to the swaps, added LP creation alerts, added ErgoPad staking and unstaking alerts, modified the template to showcase initials of address instead of hyperlink to TX link. What's that? I know yesterday. That's like 3 days after the dev update. This should be next week's dev update. I know. He's working on personal Ergcube bot where users will be alerted with their confirmed in and out TX swaps on Dex. Interesting. So we'll have a different kind of competitor, not competitor, but an alternative to Ergo Monitor. And he says, please add that to the dev update and please name him 8 times this time. So we're going to name him just the 4 times that we said his name, and that's good enough. Oh, boy. Well, Louis, it's been fantastic having you here. I think having devs, and especially you here, to be able to vocalize after
especially you.
The stuff.
You're the best audience. Say that to all the devs.
Yes. No, I don't. You can watch. Yeah, MG Pie, I told him he sucked. Same with Mike and Glasgow.
Mark that says best dad.
Best dad. Best dad. No, best dad. Awesome. So everybody, hopefully this comes out today. We tried a new thing with the video. Andy, the guy who does all these videos in the back end, created an OBS template with a bit of a different design. So this is the first time we're testing it, kind of as a crash run. Eventually, something like this will make its way to the weekly AMA. So you were kind of the guinea pig, Louis. I think it's very, very telling that we used you as a guinea pig.
Thank you.
All right. Hopefully we see some updates soon from Paideia, and I'm looking forward to those Crux Finance LP gain and loss updates so that we can really cry even harder.
I was about to say, are you really?
Or maybe celebrate. Perfect. All right. Thanks so much,
Not
Louis.
as bad as I thought.
Thanks, Louis. Thanks, everybody. Have a good week.
Thank you.